Welcome to a new episode of DT Vector, the podcast where we explore the people, the technologies, the financings, and the ideas that are shaping the future of the built world. These days, everyone's talking about AI, but how we can turn it into profit in time and carbon saved, who knows? We'll have to see. At least we're hearing everybody talking and maybe using AI. Even my mother is using AI these days. But alongside our very special guest from today, Antony Slumbers. Welcome, Antony, to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. We'll try to find how we can use AI in at a business level or at all levels of business. Anthony is a globally recognized thinker and advisor on PropTech, digital transformation, AI, and the future of work and space. We'll talk today about, of course, AI, digital twins, innovation, leadership, as Anthony has coined already concepts like space as a service. He runs courses on AI for real estate, and he has spoken to audiences around the world about how technology is reshaping our industry. Welcome, Anthony, once again to the pod. If you want, please tell us a little bit more about you, about your perspective, since you are at the intersection of the real estate and technology for a while.
For a while is exactly the case. I actually started, believe it or not, in January 1995 was my first introduction to the World Wide Web, and I was then currently working for a residential property developer, having spent 10 years, believe it or not, as a European art dealer. So I actually have a very strange background. I did history of art at university, and mobile phones didn't even exist in those days. And even in January 1995, you had to go to a shop to actually use the internet. So shortly after that, I started the UK's first commercial real estate website. And to cut a very long story short, for about 10 years or so, I ran a web agency, and we developed websites for real estate companies, primarily commercial ones. And then in 2001, I entered into a joint venture with British Land, who then were the largest real estate company in the UK, to develop a suite of property management tools. And then for the next 15 years or so, I developed property management systems. So I wrote visitor management systems, permits for work, help desk systems, all these sorts of things. And then since then, I have translated much more into writing, speaking, doing advisory work. And for the last 4 years, I've been teaching online courses. So I have a very long and varied and rather strange background, which I think enables me to approach this market in a slightly different way to most people. And of course, the way I've set it up is I'm completely independent. I'm not trying to sell anyone anything. So I can approach topics with perhaps a transparency and a authenticity that a lot of people aren't able to because of the constraints of where they work.
Mm-hmm. But what are your drivers in these directions?
Oh well, I mean I've always been incredibly I'm one of those annoyingly curious people that I'm always interested in pretty well everything, and I've always been very interested in where we're going. What's the future of what's it going to be in XYZ? I remember when I was about 20, there was a very famous book came out that was something like Mega Trends 2020, and 2020 then was like decades of. And I love this idea of thinking through where are we going to be 10, 20 years ahead. And real estate is a great place to do that, because whilst in many ways within real estate, you don't have to pay that much attention to the technology of today, you actually have to pay a huge amounts of attention to the technology of tomorrow, because real estate projects take so long. It's not unheard of, certainly in the commercial world, for a project to take 5 years or 10 years or even longer. And so it's particularly interesting now that, we've had 60 odd years of Moore's law, of the computing power doubling every 18 months or so. Whereas for the last couple of years, Jensen Huang, who's the boss of NVIDIA, who make the chips that power AI, has been talking about that they're running at Moore's law squared. The speed of change is absolutely extraordinary the last couple of years. Now, this was the case in 95 to 97 was extraordinary. Every week something new would come out. But we were starting from a very tiny base then, whereas now we're a long way up the hill. In those days, when you used to double the capability, I remember the first time anyone had a 1 gigabyte hard drive. And they only had a 1 gigabyte hard drive because there was a program called Disk Doubler. So you could buy a 500 meg hard drive, and then you buy this piece of software called Disk Doubler, and you would have a gigabyte. And at the time, a gigabyte was just the most extraordinary thing. And now I put 2 terabytes in my little phone. So we're moving at pace from a very high level. So if you start thinking about today and the commercial market in, say, 2035, so the time it will take for someone who's today thinking, oh, I'm going to build a new tower in Manhattan or Paris or Bucharest or London or wherever, it'd be 10 years probably by the time they got planning and built the thing and what have you. Well, in 10 years' time, at the very minimum, we're going to have 1,000 times more compute power than we have today. At the very minimum, we're much more likely to have 10,000 times as much compute power, maybe even 1 million times as much compute power. Again, Jensen Huang says his machines are 1 million times more powerful than they were 10 years ago in terms of the total ecosystem. By the time you've combined hardware, software, and services, it all adds up to 1 million times more capabilities. So what on earth are we going to be doing in an office building in 10 years' time with at least 1,000 times more compute power? And these are starting to get to not necessarily existential questions, but questions that could transform how we live, work, and play, and the shape and operation of our cities and the nature of geography. Because, we had COVID and everyone started working from home. And I'd been a great proponent of that for decades before. I'd worked basically from home for 25 years. And I also had my software development team were based in India for, from 15, 20 years ago. And so I knew you could operate in this world. And, we're now very much in a hybrid world, but what will we be trying to do in 10 years' time? So what types of spaces will we need? Where will we need them? How will we connect? And what is so fascinating, and why I think it's probably the most interesting time to be in this industry in decades and decades and decades, is because for most of my career, fundamentally not that much changed. The nature of the office changed a bit, but it's still somewhere. Everyone went there in the morning and left there in the evening. And that's not going to be the case going forward. So we genuinely do not know what we are going to be doing for work in 10 years' time. So whilst historically you could just pretty much extrapolate from where we are now and just say, well, do that again. Just do that again won't work this time. And so this is a time for people who have vision and foresight and imagination and intelligence and empathy and all these skills that really the industry hasn't needed that much for the last 50 years, and now suddenly we need them because we don't know what the nature of demand's going to be. So that's if you like my drivers, because it's just such a fascinating time.
Yeah. It puts in perspective, let's say, your approach, because as you said, you've started from like an art dealer, and you have developed some solutions all across the world, working even remote with guys from India. But okay, we're, let's say, working in a industry that it's in the past was changing slowly. If we're looking in the future, probably that thing will change. But now, what are the, let's say, top 3 global trends that are currently redefining real estate, and how do you see this playing out differently across markets?
Okay, well, I think the top 3 trends that will redefine real estate are technology, health and well-being, and productivity. So technology always has changed real estate. As we have uh, achieved the ability to do X because of technology, it means the nature of demand for real estate changes. So it always has been the case. So the way technology is developing now clearly has an enormous impact on how we work and the nature of demand. And then health and well-being and productivity is I have a saying that in order to get what investors want out of real estate, and for 50 odd years, real estate has been very much an investor led industry, that we were building investment products rather than real estate assets. That's what's changing. But in order for the investor to get what they want now, is that they've got to make the occupants of their spaces happy, healthy, and productive. And people say, "Oh, that's all a bit soft and fluffy, and it's even a little bit woke. Being healthy, who cares? They're employees. They should just do what they're told." But ultimately, when you think about it, in order to enable someone to be as productive as possible, you're going to get there if you can help them be as happy and healthy as possible. Happy and healthy people can be very, very productive. Unhappy, unhealthy people are not productive. So in many ways, the aim of real estate, certainly if you're talking about offices, is to create spaces that enable people to be happy, healthy, and productive. So you combine these 3 to actually end up getting what you want: technology, health and well-being, and productivity, and everything else is really a byproduct from there.
Mhm. And in your AI courses, you emphasize that workflows, not jobs. How do you see AI reshaping roles in real estate from this perspective? Happy, health, well-being, productivity.
Well, you have to accept the fact that the machines are going to do what the machines are good at. Whether you like it or not, the machines will do what they are good at. So we need to do what we are good at. And one of the things I over-index on, if you like, is the requirement for real estate to catalyze human skills. They need to be places that enable us to be really good humans. And so I've been thinking about it in terms of 3 things that humans need to do in this world. First of all, we need to ask great questions. The most important skill of the future is going to be the ability to ask a machine a really, really good question. And I mean, you see this even at a very simple level now, that whenever I read someone say, "Oh, well, I asked GPT XYZ and it gave me a really generic answer that's very average." And I immediately think, I can guarantee that you asked it a very average question, because I don't get average answers from GPT. I get really good answers from GPT. And the quality of an answer you'll get from a language model is very much a function of how good the question is that you give it. And so we need to really concentrate on asking great questions. So
And
sorry.
how do you think we can learn to ask good questions?
I think you need to think in terms of problem solving and critical thinking. So you need to, if you're addressing a problem, for instance, there's the old joke of how do you eat an elephant? Well, one spoonful at a time. You have to break things down into their component parts, and you have to think your way logically. In some ways, you need to think like a software engineer. When you're writing software, you start with, well, that's where I want to get. How do I get there? And I need to do this step. And then if I've done that step, I've got the option to do this, that, or that. And then I move to that, and then I move to that. And you break it down, and you work a flow through, and you work out how you can solve the problem by breaking it down into granular parts. So there's definitely ways one can learn to ask good questions. Well, I have a custom GPT, which are these little customized versions of ChatGPT that are very easy to develop but are super useful. And mine is called, one of them is called the Socratic questioner, and it's set up to ask you questions in a Socratic manner. And so Socrates, the Socratic method of asking questions is to guide someone and point them in direction and open up their thinking. So, well, what did you do about that? Well, I did this. Well, why did you do that? What were you hoping to achieve by that? And you work your way through a problem. And it's really interesting now, if you use one of the reasoning models, and you tap on the little section that says thinking, and it will talk you through how it's addressing the question. So the questioner has asked me that. In that case, I will do this, then I will do that, and then I will do that. And it's really interesting to watch the thinking process through. But also going back to asking good questions, quite a lot of what I do and talk about on the course is often it's a good idea to write a prompt and then give it back to the model and say, can you please optimize this prompt to leverage your particular skills? And you'll write maybe a shortish paragraph explaining what you want, and the model will probably come back with half a page of instructions where it's broken it down and it's looked at granular detail and workflows and this sort of thing. So you can definitely improve your ability to ask great questions. So you've got to ask great questions in the first place. Then you've got to create the machines to answer these questions. One of the things that's going to become a really big thing over the next 5-10 years is this idea about being an agent boss. So instead of being the boss of people, we're going to be the boss of lots of individual agents. So an agent in AI terms is a discrete piece of software that you can give it an objective and it will work out how to achieve that objective without any more human intervention. So it will work out what needs to be done, go off and do it. And we're all going to end up, when we've broken down our work into component areas and we reassemble, so we sort of unbundled our work and then rebundle it into different workflows, we're gonna end up creating and then curating a whole group of little agents. So I might need 10 different capabilities to do my job. And well, I might need 20 capabilities, but 10 of those I can get software to deal with. So I'll create these 10 little agents, which will have defined things they need to do, and then they get sent off and they do what they do. But of course, when they come back with an answer, then you've got to iterate on that and say, well, we could have got a better answer if we'd asked you a better question. And we're going to be doing a lot of this in the future. So a human's ability to ask a great question, then to create the agent to answer that question, and then to curate the agent's response is going to be what a lot of us will spend our future work doing. A lot of these machines and these agents will go off and do what we used to do now, but they can do it 10 times as fast and often at a higher level of quality. So each of us individually is going to have the capabilities to do a lot more, but the human has to stay as the apex species, if you like. So we have to remain as we are the people who ask the questions, and we are the people who respond to the answers and then iterate on those answers and ask other questions. So there's a lot of fear that the agent, the AIs will take over everything. That is absolutely not necessarily the case. And if we design our work and our societies well, we're going to find that we're going to pay more attention to upskilling individuals so they have better human skills, better critical thinking skills, better problem solving skills, better data skills, so they can ask better questions and look after these machines for them. So all of that is going to change how we work within real estate. But then if you think, well, that's obviously going to impact all our customers as well. So all our customers are going to be working like this. So what type of real estate do they need then? What types of amenities do they need? What types of services do they need? What types of connectivity do they need, etc., etc. And all those needs are going to change, and it's going to be our job to work out what needs to change and then deliver it. But there's no way there's going to be anything less than a great deal of change coming. It's probably going to come slower than the people like me talk about, because generally speaking, I only talk to other people like me. So we all think things are moving much faster. And then when you move out of your bubble, you suddenly realize, well, lots of these things that you think everybody knows, they don't know. And things just take longer. But 100% certain the way we work and the way we operate is going to change very considerably, but all in a good way. All in a way if we approach it in the right manner. One thing that is super important, and again, I emphasize this all the time on my course, that as of today, I think if you lean into these new technologies, you probably have at least 12 to 18 months to maintain a very strong competitive advantage against your peers, because only about 10% of knowledge workers across Europe, and the same as in the US, use these tools every single day. So you have a big short-term advantage. And not only do you have that advantage, but we are still in the situation where we do have complete control over what we want to develop. So it's up to us to lean in and to really think hard about what it is we want. If you don't lean in, or you just let things happen to you, then I think you're going to have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe we will reach AGI in our lifetime? Okay, I'm asking that because maybe from financing purposes or business purposes, some Elon Musk and so on, in the past, okay, let's say years, there was a discussion that in our lifetime we'll have an higher intelligence form of, let's say, artificial general intelligence that will, let's say, rule the world. And
I,
how do you think how to?
I wish in I wish in many ways the AI research labs had not put as their aim to achieve AGI. It's sort of a distraction. I wish they'd concentrated more that their aim was to solve big problems. And it's interesting if you look at a company like DeepMind, run by Demis Hassabis, probably the preeminent AI lab research lab in the world. Their whole focus is on solving scientific problems. If you ever listen to Demis Hassabis, and actually, if you're going to listen to any AI leader, listen to Demis Hassabis. He's apart from being probably the smartest, he's the most sensible and even-handed commentator. But their aims are to solve protein folding, to solve material science, and that sort of thing, as opposed to this amorphous idea of AGI. You know, smarter than anyone that's ever been on the planet. Or actually, OpenAI's original definition of AGI were systems that could perform most economically rewarded tasks. So they could do anything that we were economically rewarded for, which is not really a very great aim. It's almost like say, well, what we want is a system where nobody can do anything that has an economic reward. So I don't know. I mean, in many ways, I'm sure we will get there. We're not going to get there with the technologies that exist at the moment. They're clearly going to need. You listen to someone like Yann LeCun, one of the original gods of AI, and he'll say we need several new major breakthroughs before we actually get there. You're not going to get there just through language models. But in many ways, I sort of don't care that if we get there, if we concentrate less on trying to get there, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Because if you just take the capabilities of these models now, that if you sit and have a conversation with Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT, unless you are a world authority on your subject, it probably knows more than you already. So how much better is it going to be? It knows more than you, unless you're a world authority on your subject. So even if we stopped today, we've got a decade of just implementing already the capabilities that we've got. And ultimately, whilst I find all the new developments incredibly exciting, in many ways one has to take account of how much can societies cope with. And there's a certain amount of change that societies can cope with, and we don't necessarily want to overload them. I mean, you look at the global situation now. You look at America and Trump and all the MAGA disaffection. That is all fundamentally a consequence of us not paying enough attention to globalization. That at the time, lots of people, going back to 2000, when did China join the World Trade Organization? I think it was 2001 or something like that. Lots of people said, this is going to have consequences amongst the middle classes and the manufacturing industries within the West. And we need to pay attention to that. And actually, no one did pay attention to that. And so you had huge pressures building up in America, and now which leads to all the splits and the diversity and the fighting and everything. So in some ways, it wouldn't be a bad thing if we just took a little bit more time. We'd just be really, really fast instead of really, 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 really.
And how do you think AI and automation will change how we're let's say, building and operating, how we're designing and operating the buildings right now, and how will impact the future of work and space.
Well, I think every facet of the value chain contains a large percentage of things to which you can apply AI, from original site selection through to end disposal of an asset. And every single section of that, we can give ourselves more options, and we can pay a lot more attention to optimizing things. So, for instance, when we're designing a building, it's a lot easier for us now to have 100 different variants of what it might look like, or the massing. Or if we're designing just a floor layout, we can design lots of different variants on that. So we can give ourselves the ability to apply more intelligence at every single step of the way, which is going to require us to have really good judgment. So, for instance, one of the important points, of course, is that if you suddenly give someone 50 options, the most important question then is who has the skill to pick that it's that one out of the 50. So if you give people 2 options, it's 50-50. If you give people 50 options, what on earth are they going to? So this goes back to human skills and understanding what we should apply our intelligence to. And so, if you think, in your world with digital twins, of course, the great advantage of digital twins is that you can build things without actually building them. So I don't need to go through the process of building this before I find out that is this going to work. We can work all this out before. And as these systems get smarter and smarter and are more and more capable of ingesting more and more data sources, we're going to be able to ask more and more complicated and sophisticated questions with this digital twin. So instead of just saying, well, does this comply with the building code? That's sort of, 10 years ago, that would have been really hard, but now it's like table stakes. But, well, if we do this, and if something happens in another area of the city 5 miles away, what might be the consequences for this building? Or if the climate changes, or if I have 1,000 people in this building as opposed to 1,200, what difference does? So we can model all these things in a way that should enable us to build much better real estate. So in terms of actually creating the real estate in the first place, AI manifested through things like digital twins and machine learning and then generative AI should enable us to create much better real estate, and it should also enable us to operate real estate much better. And I always think this is the fundamental aim of the real estate industry. I think should be to build a better built environment. We need a better built environment. We need to decarbonize the world to start with. And a lot of people have to live, work, and play in really awful real estate. We should be able to create much better real estate. And all these tools and these technologies should enable us to build better buildings for occupiers, easy assets to buy and sell, and much more transparent and trusted data around everything. So I have a vision of buildings being self-optimizing and self-describing, that this building understands how it is functioning, how well it is providing for the needs of the people using it, and optimizes itself continually to try and make people happy, healthy, and productive. And that's where we should be going with these tools. It's interesting. I've been doing some research the last few weeks. I'm doing a big presentation to a real estate company in Asia, and looking at the PropTech scene in Asia as opposed to the PropTech scene here. What is very clear, and this has been a bugbear of mine for a long time, a lot of PropTech in the West is actually fintech. It's about financing, it's about mortgages, it's about that sort of stuff. Not that much PropTech in the West is actually about real estate. Not much is actually about building better buildings. Whereas in Asia, there's actually not much PropTech around financing. There's a lot less PropTech around trading, because they don't have very open public markets. The data for doing brokerage, online brokerage, is harder to come by in Asia. So they just don't do a lot of that. Where all the money in Asia goes into PropTech is into operations, into building better buildings. And what has amazed me the last couple of weeks doing this research is a lot of the things that I've been writing about, saying, this is what I think is going to come to pass over the next 5 to 10 years. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been going, wow, it already exists. In a lot of these buildings, it already exists, because all the PropTech money and investment has gone into the operations of a building rather than the financing or the investment side. So we need to do two things. I think in the West. One, we need a little bit more humility in terms of thinking, well, we know it all. We're ahead of everyone else. There's a lot going on, which is actually, frankly, quite a lot ahead of where we are. And we need to pay more attention to the prop in PropTech and the real estate in PropTech. And of course, this is going to become, people talk about, well, what are we going to do when the machines do everything? There's not going to be any work. And I just look at the state of the built environment and think, well, once you've solved that, once you've decarbonized the built environment across the world, and once you've created high quality space for everybody, then let's worry about not having anything to do. But a lot of modern business is about intangibles. A lot of it's about software and patents and things you can't touch. But in some ways, I have a feeling we're moving to a world where we can deal with all these intangibles through software, but that is actually going to enable us to pay a lot more attention to the physical world. That we are going to pay a lot more attention to creating better buildings and decarbonizing and using more materials. And there's still a great deal of the physical world that we need to apply technology to. So yeah, it's a
I 100% I agree with you. And we should focus on property, and even for PropTech, let's say, industry. And I'm thinking at, let's say, the digital twin part. And when I'm looking at the digital twin, I'm looking at the data to help us or the AI to make better decisions. And it's a lot to work on that, because we need maybe standards or open standards to interact between, let's say, architects, designers, builders, and facility managers also, because you produce every day, we're producing information.
Yeah.
So if we're keeping that and passing that from one another, and that information is helping us communicating better in the same direction to be more sustainable, to be more happy, as you said, to look at our well-being and to be more productive, because that what the data and the open data can help you achieve. Yeah, it's that could help a lot. But looking at the, let's say, open standards, because for sure at one point regarding the built environment will need to adapt some standards that will help us communicate more in every stages and with all stakeholders in our industry. How do you see the how should the regulatory parts apply to AI? And should we do something in Europe or the worldwide part to have some regulation for AI? Or if we're trying to do something, we're gonna miss out some let's say opportunities to resolve some problems.
That that is a really difficult question, isn't it? That clearly in Europe we are very we are very minded to regulate everything, and it does worry me that we might well be regulating innovation out of Europe altogether. Now, if you talk to the people who are very pro regulation, they say no, that's not the case. This is going to enable all this innovation because there's set rules and whatever. And I do think there should be set rules, but there should be set rules in terms of fundamental principles of elaborations on do no harm. But when you regulate when you regulate software before anyone really understands what it is going to be capable of, it becomes very difficult. So there's a lot of guessing what is going on and what's going to matter in a few years' time. And frankly, most of the companies doing really frontier developments, they don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. They don't know what is going to come out the other end. And we've got to give people the space to experiment with certain constraints. And I'm not sure we've got the balance right in Europe. But in the same way, I don't think they've got the balance right in the US, particularly recently. I mean, the US is approaching it that all regulation is terrible, the work of the devil. No one should abide by any laws. Nothing should get in the way of doing whatever you want, and that's going to lead to a lot of problems. And I don't think it really helps anyone in this sort of free for all. People do need to know the framework under which they can innovate. Having said that, mostly this shouldn't apply within real estate. I can't think of many things that I'd like to see happen in real estate that really come up against these problems. One of the interesting areas, the industry needs to develop more open standards and more transparency in order to achieve some of the things it wants to do. Because this is not an industry that has an enormously good reputation for doing the right thing across everything. And so you get a lot of situations where you want to do something, but the customer won't let you because they go, no, I don't want you to know that. So I think there needs to be a trade-off. So for instance, if it's interesting if you look at facial recognition attitudes or the attitudes towards facial recognition in Asia as opposed to the facial recognition in Europe. In Europe, you can do facial recognition, but under lots of different constraints, and mostly you'll be better off not doing it because you'll spend an enormous amount of money dealing with compliance and regulators and all that. But on the other hand, I was reading about a building in, I can't remember where in Asia it was, but as you walk in, it knows who you are, it summons the lift to your floor, and where you are due to work, it adjusts the environmental conditions to the environmental conditions that you like. So Antony walks in, lift comes for the 15th floor because he works on the 15th floor. He likes it quite quiet. He likes it quite light, not too noisy, and he likes it at about 19 degrees. And by the time I've got there, it's adjusted that space for me. This is the sort of adaptability and customization that a building should be able to provide for just about everyone who uses it. And this would be the joy of fully optimized digital twins, transparent, open systems that you could create a user experience like that and actually make it happen. But obviously, to do that, the building needs to know a lot about me. It needs to know where I work. It needs to know what I do, what I like, it needs to know a lot about me. Now, in many cases, people will not give the authority. They'll say, no, that's invading my privacy. I don't want to give you that. In which case, I get a much better service than they will. But the industry is going to have to become very good at explaining why it wants a certain piece of data. So every building owner should be able to say, we collect these 20 pieces of data, and the reason we do it is to provide these five services, and this is how we store your data. This is who we sell it to or don't sell it to, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's complete, transparent, trusted data exchange, and then you can do lots of things that you couldn't do before. Now, if you say something like that to a hardcore AI Act evangelist in Europe, they will freak out. They will go, you know, this is terrible. This is terrible. You're abusing. You're abusing on so many levels here. But it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense. But it has to be a fair trade. And if I do it wrong, I need to be punished. So if I say to Antony, I'm not going to sell your data, and then I do sell your data, I need to be punished. Not let off. I absolutely need to be punished. So we need to. I think in many ways we need to be a bit more grown up, and a bit more, in some ways, societally conscious that we are trying to create a better built environment that is for everybody. And in order to do that, we need to try and create this type of user experience. And in order to create that user experience, we need these technologies, these bits of data, this transparency, et cetera, and to have a grown-up conversation about that. But we're not so good at that. On the other hand,
And
sorry,
yeah,
just wanted to say, so
go on.
regulators, good regulation is a good thing. But in many ways also, I think the investment community could drive a lot of this. Because if you think about it, in many ways, the investment community has imposed sustainability on the industry. So if you, for instance, want to build a prime office building and you want to fund it and then you want to sell it, that is not going to happen unless it is a deeply sustainable building. Because the top investors will only fund a deeply sustainable building, and they will only buy a deeply sustainable building. So just by changing their criteria, the investment community has changed a big section of the industry. But the same with this transparency. So if the investment community said, look, we have real problems when we buy an asset and we have real problems when we sell an asset, because we've never got access to the right data. So it takes us 4 months to put together all the data we need to sell this building or to buy this building, because no one knows where the data is. It's all in a mess and it's all in a muddle. If we had transparent, trusted data repositories, preferably within digital twins, the building could explain exactly how it performs, what it costs to run, what its dilapidations is going to be, what CapEx is going to be needed to be spent, the performance of everything in real time, immediate transactions. Now that must be worth to the investment community a lot of money. So I can trade a building 4 times as fast because I've got perfect information about everything. Now, if the investment community was to push harder for this sort of transparent, trusted data, then a lot of these other things would just happen. People would adopt the technology, they would put in the sensors, they would build the digital twins, they would train everyone to use all these things properly, and it would be dispersed across the whole industry just because the demand from finance said that. So I think within the next 10 years, and I wrote a newsletter about this last week, I think within the next 10 years, this is what's going to happen. Certainly at the top end of the market, the investment community is just going to insist that it wants to transfer. If you think about the stock market, if I want to buy shares in a company, a public company, I know everything about that company. I probably know the size of the jacket that the CEO wears. I know everything. And it's all transparent. And I don't see a lot of poor people working in finance. They seem to do all right with open information. In real estate, we take the opposite attitude, that we say, well, we're going to make money by holding on to our information and not sharing it. All it does is reduce the quality of product that we can deliver, the quality of investment, and everything else. But I think in the next 10 years, we're going to get to a stage where investors are going to want to be able to just compare that building to that building now. How 2 buildings exactly the same. How well does that perform? How well does that perform? Give me the information now, because it would make so much sense to do that. So I think
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that's where we're going.
For sure. And you're talking more than 10 years ago about space as a service, and now it's like the next practical thing to do. But okay, I'm a CEO and owner, and I'm seeing you, Anthony, speaking about that. I have a vision like that, and I want to apply in my organization. What should I do? How am I building a, let's say, solid business case, a solid strategy for digital twins and AI adoption? Which KPI generally matter to measure the return of investment in this?
Well, I think the KPIs are going to be all around performance of the building, satisfaction of the occupiers, and the state of data. How quickly can I get hold of the data I need? How well does this building actually perform? You know, we've got all these accreditations that it's this gold standard, it's that platinum standard, and that's the day it's finished. And everyone knows 6 months' time it doesn't perform anything like that. So we need to know, how does this building actually perform now? How is it being used? Does it give the occupiers what they need? Those are the sorts of KPIs that I think are most important. In many ways, they're the sort of obvious ones you would ask if you were behaving rationally. Does it work well? Do people like it? What's its performance? And can you prove all that to me? Yeah.
And if, okay, because the industry changed slowly in the past. And I have, let's say, a big organization that is used with that rhythm. And now I should adapt and to change everything in a few, not days, because the projects are like that. And let's say, in the next 5 years, how should I approach it? What strategy should I take looking in the next 5 years? Now I'm let's say, the only guy in my organization that I'm adopting technology, AI, digital twin part. But I want in the future to have all the organization aligned with this strategy. What should I do?
I do think with all these things you do need buy-in from the top. I think it's very difficult if you're trying to promote something that isn't being given air cover from the top. In terms of AI in general, you need air cover from the top saying it's all right to experiment, and then you need as much delivery from the bottom. You need a lot of bottom up. You need to give people the freedom to experiment, to prove their story. You can constrain people. It can be, you have freedom to show me how you can do this better, not just to do anything you want. You've got to show me how you can do this better. But I think so much of this will come from the top-down attitude of the people running the company. That what type of company are they trying to create? And we would, you can take this from the attitude of companies approaching AI. There's some companies just ignoring it, some companies talking a lot about it but not doing very much, and there's other companies that are really leaning in. And I think there's going to start to be a big divergence between the performance of those types of companies. And so I think if you believe that having something like a sophisticated digital twin will enable you to create a better building and then operate a better building and then continuously monitor that bottom better building, which will enable you to be in a better position should you want to sell it. If you believe that is true, and that by creating this better building with a better user experience, it's worth more, that you can charge more for it, and you will take less time to let it, you will have less occupancy problems, then I think you have to follow through the whole argument as it goes down. I believe we need to create great buildings that people will pay more money for. How do we do that? And yes, a lot of that is a human question, but a lot of it is a technology question, and it'll probably come back to a digital twin. But if you haven't got that vision at the top that that's what you're trying to do, it's a hard game to prove it to someone. We will get to a case, of course, where you'll get to a tipping point where it always happens, doesn't it? You get the early adopters and then the earlier majority, and then sooner or later, it's just something that you do as a matter of course. But clearly there is the opportunity to create better real estate now using technology and human skills. And I don't want to down. You're not going to do this just by technology. The human input is really, really important. But there's clearly a way of creating better assets like that. And if you look at the performance now, so certainly, if you go to New York or London, there's only a small number of really great buildings, but they're in enormous demand and they're making record rents. And there's quite a lot of flexible space, and there's a lot of flex operators, and the good ones are full. They're doing really well. All the stuff in the middle, which is okay and just a bit average, has a real problem. So the market is telling us that we need better real estate, and better real estate will generate more money. So it's a
And how do you,
thing.
yeah, and how do you think all these adoptions of technologies into the buildings will affect our cities? And how does your ideal city of the future will look like?
Oh, well, my ideal city of the future is Florence without the summer tourists. Give me 15, 20 Florence without the summer tourists. But essentially, I think this is an enormous opportunity for Europe, actually, and this stands in strong contrast to a lot of the US. The US has a number of really great cities, but it has a number of cities that were purely designed around the car. And so you have central business districts where there's nothing but office towers and car parks. And those are clearly problematic because no one really wants to go there. Whereas Europe has a lot of walkable, livable, affordable-ish cities, great sport, culture, a lot of civilization. That's sort of what everyone wants in a city. You want to be able to walk around. It needs to be comfortable. It needs to be relatively affordable. You want great sport. You want great culture. You want great shops. You want great music. You want theatre. You want restaurants. You want all of this stuff. We sort of know what a great city looks like. And, you know, I mean, one of the things was thinking about, should a digital twin apply to a building or should it apply to a city? And I think it needs to apply for both. You sort of think, well, you know, no building is an island. Everything is connected to everything is connected to everything else. And we need to use these technologies to enable us to optimize our cities as much as our buildings. And a lot of that, I think, is going to come back to the basic principles of the 15-minute city, that we want to live somewhere where we can get what we need without going too far. And actually, a 15-minute city, if you're on a bicycle, is actually quite a big space. You know, you can cycle quite a long way in 15 minutes. And so if you do a big circle around where you are now within 15 minutes, it's not as small as it sounds. And, you know, can I work, live and play in this area? You know, I'm pretty sure we know what a great city is. Now, there's different flavors. You know, New York is a great city in a different way to Florence is a great city, but there's sort of component parts, and there's a DNA. There's a DNA of a great city, and we know.
And
we know
those should remain the same, the human touch, to put it like that. Even if in the future we'll have a digital twin map for smart city, not to the cadastre map, but the natural part, the human touch, the culture, and so on should remain the same. There were a few powerful
in Singapore, which famously has a citywide digital city. They have a system for monitoring trees, and the reason they monitor trees is to monitor trees that are likely to fall over. And so the model and the sensors are in place to keep an eye on the trees, because it's better to deal with the tree before it falls over than when it falls over. And there's so
Yeah.
many instances of that, or just systems to change the rubbish bins when they're full, or or to adjust the traffic, or to check the watering of the park. There's so many things that we could just make better if we have better information of them. And we know what good and nice and human looks like. We do. I mean, there's variations on a theme, but essentially we know what we need to do.
Yeah. And we, as you said, we have to do that for our health, for our well-being, and for our productivity, not for only for the sense of technology. No, we need that for our reasons,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
put it like that.
yeah. And it's
be more
it's very
happy.
important that productivity point is super important. We need people to innovate and work together and push on in business and create better businesses, etc., etc. I'm just saying that I think the way to get a really productive, innovative area is to think about these other things, and then push hard for the productivity. None of this is to suggest that we just make life so wonderful that no one has to do anything. The point is, this should enable us to do more.
Yeah, of course. Anthony, thanks for this powerful perspective. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get a bit more personal and ask you a few closing reflections.
Yeah.
And if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self at the start of your career, what would it be?
I was thinking about this, and it's quite tricky because I read quite a lot of people on LinkedIn say, "Oh, well, I wish I'd told my younger self to work harder, to be more serious, and to do X, Y, Z." And you think, oh, I would sort of do the opposite. I would say, certainly don't have less fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had a healthy skepticism of everything. Why is this the way it is, etc. Not cynicism. Never be cynical. Always be skeptical. Be curious. Enjoy yourself. I guarantee you get old quicker than you think, and you've got to enjoy it as you go along. But yeah, I don't think I'd change anything really, because you have to. Well, I suppose the only thing I would say to people is do try and be faithful to yourself. So don't try and be what you're not, and push hard
Yeah.
on who you are.
Great advice, I think, even for our audience as well. You said some names, but who do you personally follow in this industry? I don't know, economists, technologists, real estate, thought leaders, and whose insights you find most valuable?
Well, I've got quite a long list, which I will send you, which you can send in, put into the show notes. But I mainly follow the technology side rather than specifically the real estate side. So there's a number of really good podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. There's one called the Artificial Intelligence Show, which comes out on Tuesdays, which does a sort of roundup of what's been going on during the week. It's really good. The New York Times has a podcast called Hard Fork, which comes out on Friday, which is an entertaining dig into what's happening in technology. I listen and read somebody called Benedict Evans. Benedict Evans used to be a telecoms analyst, and then he worked for Andreessen Horowitz, and is now a sort of independent smart guy, actually. So Benedict Evans writes a weekly newsletter, which is really, really, really good. And then there's some of the other ones, like there's a one run by Bill Gurley, who's an old school venture capitalist called the BG2 Pod. And I listen to Reid Hoffman, and there's a very good project management podcast called Project Flux, which is run by some friends of mine who are project managers, quite, hardcore project managers. And it's an AI for project managers. And that's very good. Project Flux is very good. But essentially, I find you just have to read a lot and listen to a lot. It's very, very hard to keep up at the moment. In many ways, I say to people, actually, just follow me, because I will read and listen to all the things that you don't have time to, and hopefully, I will give you a filter from what you actually need to know, because it's tough. But there's a lot of good stuff out there.
That's great. And when do you have your next AI course?
The next course starts, the first live session of it starts on the 5th of September, which is cohort 12.
Next week.
It's called the Generative AI for Real Estate People course. And we focus on what a real estate practitioner needs to do. It's not a technical course, but it will give you all the foundations you need to be able to start leveraging these tools very, very powerfully within 3 weeks. Have a look at my website, antonyslumbers.com. It's off there, and we're starting soon.
Yeah, that's great. I personally will look for it. Maybe at one point I'll find the time to come to your courses. And finally, if you could recommend one person we should invite as a guest on DT Vector, who would be and why?
I think you should ask a chap called James Pellat, who used to work for GPE, which was previously known as Great Portland Estates. They're one of the best developers in central London. Their whole portfolio is in central London, been around a very long time. But James is very big on digital twins. And James was responsible for innovation at GPE. And GPE have created a number of the best new human-centric buildings in the centre of London. And James actually does know digital twins in a lot of detail. So you should get in touch with him. He'd be very interesting. You could dive very deep on all the technicalities of digital twins with James.
That's brilliant. Anthony, from the start till the end, you were brilliant, and thank you for coming to DT Victor. Hope we'll talk to you soon, maybe for some future developments. But thank you once again for coming to our podcast.
It was an absolute pleasure, and I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And to our listener, you know what to do. Spread the word if you loved our interaction, because I will try to find people like Anthony, or maybe we'll have James Pellat in our podcast in a future episode. Until next time, I'm Eugen Ursu, and this is DT Vector, the platform that is connecting the dots of the built environment. Thank you. Bye-bye.